नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे.
Hare Krishna, we'd like to welcome all of the wonderful devotees who have joined us over YouTube Live, devotees who have joined us over Facebook Live, and dear devotees who have joined us over Zoom. We welcome each and every one of you to this very special and final session of this sixth session of where we are talking about the 6 enemies of the mind. And today's final enemy that we will be discussing is the enemy called as envy. Now, all the 5 previous enemies that we discussed, which is lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, these 5 can be transformed in the service of Krishna. But the 6th one, envy, is such a emotion that it has to actually be completely uprooted so that we can use ourselves in Krishna's service properly. So in this regard, it is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam in 9th canto, chapter 11, text 23.
पुरुषो रामचरितं श्रवणैरुपधारयन् आश्रम्स्य परो राजन् कर्मबन्धैर्विमुच्यते. O King Parikshit, anyone who orally receives the narrations concerning the characteristics of Lord Ramachandra's pastimes will ultimately be freed from the disease of envy and thus be liberated from the bondage of fruitive activities. One such personality was Duryodhan, who was actually called Suyodhan when he was born, but because of his envious actions, he became famous as Duryodhan. We can see how Duryodhan and Kauravas, they were so envious of Pandavas right from their childhood.
What all did they do? What all atrocious activities did they perform against the Pandavas? Poisoning Bhima, throwing him into the river when the Pandavas and Kauravas were young boys in the Gurukul. At that time, Duryodhan and Dushasan had poisoned Bhima. Second was when they were attacked by deadly weapons. When all the Kuru princes, the Pandavas, after they came back from the Gurukul, they were giving a display of their prowess. At that time, Duryodhan, out of his envy for Arjuna, he actually put Karna in front of Arjuna, saying that, oh, you think you're a great warrior? No, come and try to defeat this Karna. He is a much more valiant warrior than you. So this is all out of envy. Then what did Duryodhana do after that? He sent the Pandavas to the palace of Lak in Varnavrata, the Lakshagraha, in order to burn them down. They were actually just saved by the intelligent interference of Vidura. Then after being exiled, when they were roaming around in the forest, and then when they came back with Draupadi after, winning her in the Swayamvar, that time Duryodhan was not agreeable that Dhritarashtra should give the Pandavas the kingdom of Hastinapur. Rather, Duryodhana asked his father to give them Khandav Prastha and not Hastinapur's kingdom. And then they cheated. Duryodhana cheated the Pandavas in the game of dice and took away Indraprastha, and they insulted Mother Draupadi. How much atrocity. Then the second game, they cheated the Pandavas again and exiling them to the forest for 12 years, and the 13th year, and they had to spend it in incognito. And if they would be recognized in the 13th year, then they would have to go back for another 12 years. Because Duryodhana said, I can't tolerate seeing you people. I just can't tolerate. So I will find you out in the 13th year so that you go back again for 12 more years. That was the condition. We can see how much envious a person can be to give such conditions. Then, after the 13th year of incognito, when they were not recognized, when Krishna came as the messenger of peace, as Shanti Doot, Krishna said, okay, if you don't want to give Hastinapur, keep Hastinapur. You don't want to give Indraprastha, keep Indraprastha. At least give the Pandavas 5 villages so that they can perform their duties of Kshatriyas. And Duryodhan said, I will not give them enough land that can fit through the eye of a needle. That was the level of his envy. And then he forced the Pandavas to the battle of Kurukshetra. So Srila Prabhupada, he describes in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that Duryodhana and the Kauravas, they were aggressors. So let us see, according to the Bhagavad Gita, who is an aggressor.
It's said that according to Bhagavad Gita, there are 6 types of aggressors. First, a poison giver, one who sets fire to the house, one who attacks with deadly weapons, one who plunders riches, one who occupies another's land, and one who kidnaps a wife. And such aggressors are at once to be killed, and no sin is incurred by killing such aggressors. And such killing of aggressors is quite befitting for any ordinary man. So we see Duryodhan was at the height of envy, and the way he was dealt with in the final battle of Kurukshetra, especially in the fight between Bhima and Duryodhan, he was killed by Bhima in the battle.
Also, we see in the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, we see how Queen Shuruchi addressed the 5-year-old boy, the innocent little Dhruva Maharaj. How did she address him? When little Dhruva was trying to get on the throne of his father, Shuruchi, Mother Shuruchi, the stepmother of Dhruva, she addressed him with so much envy. Actually, Shuruchi was very, very envious of Dhruva, and she said, indirectly, she was saying that Dhruva has to take birth from her womb in order to sit on the throne. So she is indirectly telling him that he has to change his body in order to sit on the throne. According to her, first of all, he had to die, then take his body in her womb, and only then it would be possible for Dhruva Maharaj to sit on the throne of his father. So in this material world, it is evident that everyone is in competition with everyone else. Everybody wants distinction and to be worshipped as the most beautiful, the most famous, the most wealthiest, the best friend of everyone. And, this is, just wanting to be the best and the best. That is the fight in the material world.
So another tip for uprooting envy is service attitude. Our service attitude keeps envy in check. One becomes very eager to hear about, glorify, and gain the service mood and good qualities of another person through association and humble assistance. Everyone has a chance to develop their transcendental desires in this way. Materially, envy is a separatist, which is working overtime, busy trying to separate us from other people or bring down the object of envy. The purpose of envy is not to elevate someone. The purpose of envy is to bring that person down. However, it can be turned into an inspiration if we can see, oh, these qualities in this person that I'm envious of actually belong to Krishna. And if I should glorify Krishna that your qualities are so great and you have loaned these qualities, you have given these qualities on a loan to this particular person. So instead of being envious with that person that he has been loaned, why not glorify the person who is the possessor, original possessor of these qualities? He's the one, the source of these qualities. And that will subdue our envy and, and transform it towards Krishna. Envy arises when we want what another person has. And we should try to receive a state of mind in which we are content with what we have and simply admire or look up to what another person has. Because real joy is in wanting what we already have.
And we can defeat the negative thoughts by shifting, or by differently aligning our consciousness in our minds. Instead of thinking, oh wow, look, he or she is so good at everything and I'm barely even good at only just one thing, we can rather think, wow, this person is gifted by Krishna and he is helping me to encourage so many people. I want association of such a person because that person is dear to Krishna. So, in this, this kind of thing, because it is not natural to us, it may not work the first time or even for the first couple of times. So, but each time a negative thought or a jealous thought arises in our mind, we must try to turn it around. Rather, let's, instead of focusing on that negativity, let's try to focus on something good that is there in that other person.
Sometimes Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he knew that there is some quarrel going on between two devotees, during his lecture or sometimes during his Vyasa Puja, he would call these devotees specifically on the stage and ask them, I am your guru, and now both of you, my instruction is both of you glorify each other. And now these devotees are standing on stage. There is the instruction of Guru. They are not able to see any good quality on the other person because they are filled with so many different misconceptions about that other person. But now, because of being in this situation, they have to go deep into their hearts and actually figure out what is good about this person. This devotee honors prasad very nicely. Or any good quality they try to see. And then when they speak 2, 3 good qualities about the other devotee, suddenly they feel, well, this person is not that bad after all. And then during kirtan, he would make them dance together. And that completely uproots envy in our hearts.
Hari Hari. So we must also remember that ultimately there is actually no jealousy or envy in the spiritual world. And why is that? Because everyone in the spiritual world has a unique and special access to Krishna to their heart's content. So let us understand this with an example, that when we have eaten dinner prasadam to our heart's content and we just cannot even have even one more bite, does the thought ever enter our mind that, oh, my neighbor is having a very nice delicious plate of prasadam? No, this thought never comes to our mind because we are completely full. So this is how it is actually in the spiritual world. And this is how it can even be right now here in this material world, only if we allow it. So when we have equal access to Krishna right now, in fact, when we have equal access to the spiritual master also right now, and if we latch on to them, we become very eager to serve them as would any other devotee. So this is why Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu says, Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sada Hari.
We can only chant the holy name of the Lord constantly if we are not envious of anyone. Of course, not envious of the Lord, But when we are envious of any person, we are actually envious of their quality, which actually belongs to Krishna. So when we are envious of someone else, we are actually envious of the Lord. We may not realize this, but that is an act of envy. In fact, it is said very subtly, if we think about it, any act of sense gratification that we do, we are claiming that I am the enjoyer. And now we become in direct competition with the supreme enjoyer, Krishna. But instead of being the enjoyer, if we are always in the service attitude, and not, that's why it is said we should abstain from sense gratification, because so that we can get away from the enjoying mentality and not be envious of the Lord. Every act of sense gratification, this means, is an act of envy towards the Lord. We may not realize it. We may say, no, no, I'm not envious of the Lord. But our actions are showing that. So the Srimad Bhagavatam explains the only thing that extinguishes envy, which is the basic root of all disease and cannot be engaged in the service of the Lord, the only way is sincerely hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord.
Haribo.
And how is this possible? Because when we hear and chant the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we are directly associating with Him. In the beginning, due to the disease of envy, which is like a disease called jaundice,
Or yellow fever,
hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord is sometimes very bitter, very distasteful. But if we sit at home, read scriptures, come to Bhagavatam class, come to the Gita class, come to Pravachan, instead of saying, I'll rather go to cinema, rather watch TV, rather read some novel, or rather talk prajalpa, talk nonsense with my friends. It's so, and sometimes we think it's so boring to just sit down and listen to Srimad Bhagavatam. Why? Because that's our disease, the disease of envy. Rather than to give enjoyment to Krishna, we want to be the enjoyer. But if we continuously hear and chant the glories of the Lord in proper association, then gradually, little by little, this envy will be uprooted. Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki.
Srila Shukadev Goswami is explaining herein that anyone who hears the narrations of the Supreme Lord's pastimes will ultimately be freed from the disease of envy and thus be liberated from the bondage of fruitive activities. But it is very, very important. Here, it's always being said, we must hear the glories of the Supreme Lord. So it is very important to understand that whom should we hear the narrations from? Srila Prabhupada very, very carefully says that it should be from someone who is teaching according to the previous acharyas, one who teaches only pure unalloyed devotion to Krishna, following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas, repeating the words of the acharyas, not adding anything, not subtracting anything, not dividing anything, and not multiplying anything. So if we hear from such a person, then and only then it has a truly powerful effect of actual hearing, and it purifies our heart.
Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. One must follow the footsteps of great souls. Then our spiritual progress becomes undisturbed. So to come together sincerely to hear and chant the glories of the Lord is the only means by which we can become free from the disease of envy. If we are envious of any person, what is the antidote for that? Glorification.
Glorify.
We glorify that person, the envy goes away. We glorify Krishna, that subtle envy which we are not able to accept and acknowledge and identify, that gets destroyed. Generally, gossip, prajalpa, is the most heinous when it is towards a person who are very dear and familiar with, not somebody we have never heard of. Familiarity breeds contempt. That's the law of material nature. We are envious of only people who are better than us in a field that we are good at.
Correct. And
If
who
we
are
are,
close to us.
yes, and if we are not good at a particular field, say if I don't know much about cooking and someone is a great cook, I don't have any envy. But if I'm good at certain thing and that person is really good at that same thing, then envy develops. So you can see that it is very situational, very temporary. Familiarity breeds contempt. That's the law of material nature. As long as familiarity is based on mutual sense gratification, then when we talk prajalpa, when we talk nonsense, that means we are taking only for mutual sense gratification. Material familiarity breeds contempt, but spiritual familiarity breeds love.
Very well. So, how can we achieve spiritual familiarity is the question. That when we are discussing how to better serve the spiritual master, how to better serve each other, how to better serve the mission of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, when we discuss the glories and the pastimes of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, then that discussion will remove all envy and create an atmosphere of love within each other. And that is what is the requirement of the hour. So when there is love and trust amongst each other, then there is only one hope of love and trust being established among one another, and that is the topic of our actions, the topic of our discussions, and the topic of all our interactions with one another in Krishna's service, in the service also of our spiritual masters.
So there is a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam 4th canto by the Prachetas which explains that those persons who come together to hear and chant the glories of the Lord, they are free from envy to one another. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Varam Vrinidvam Bhadram Vo Yuyam Me Nripanandana Sauhardena Prithak Dharmas Tushtoham Sauridena Vaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear sons of the King, I'm very much pleased by the friendly relationships among you. All of you are engaged in one occupation, devotional service.
Haribo.
I'm so pleased with your mutual friendship that I wish all of you good fortune. Now you may ask benediction of me." So when devotees come together to glorify the Lord automatically is very pleased. When the devotees come together and dance and chant in front of the Lord, hear and chant the glories of the Lord, Krishna is automatically pleased, as we see here in this verse from the Prachetas.
So Pitama Bhishma also in his beautiful prayers in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto, chapter 9, which are very famously known as the Bhishma Stuti, wherein Pitama Bhishma, he is giving us the formula by which we can focus our mind on the Supreme Lord rather than on negative emotions such as envy. So we will discuss this formula to overcome and completely uproot envy.
Shri Bhishma Uvacha
Iti matirupakalpita vitrishna Bhagavati satvata pungave vibhumni Swasukhamupagate kvachid vihartum Prakritimupeyushiyad bhava Pravaha. So Bhishma Pitama says that now let me invest my thinking, my feeling, and my willing, which were so long engaged in different subjects and occupational duties. Let me now invest it in the all-powerful Lord Sri Krishna. Krishna is always self satisfied, but sometimes, being the leader of the devotees, he enjoys transcendental pleasure by descending to this material world, although from him only the material world is created. So, this is how Pitama Bhishma is teaching us that how, while being in this world, we can try to be in the spiritual world. Here's another beautiful meditation for us to focus on the personality and the features of Sri Krishna in the very next verse that Pitama Bhishma sings.
Tribhuvana kamanam tamalavarnam ravikaragoravaramparam dadhyane vapuralakakula vritananajam vijaya sakheratirastu me Anavadya. Sri Krishna is the intimate friend of Arjuna. He has appeared on this earth in his transcendental body, which resembles the bluish color of the tamal tree.
Haribo.
His body attracts everyone in the three planetary systems, upper, middle, and lower planetary systems. May his glittering yellow dress and his lotus face, covered with the paintings of sandalwood pulp, be the object of my attraction, and may I not desire fruitive results.
Jai Pitama Bhishma ki Jai.
Finally, the Vrajavadhus, the gopis, are an outstanding example of utilizing everything in Krishna's service. That's the reason why Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu has taught us Gopi Bharatur Padakamalayur Dasa Dasa Anudasa.
So, in this regard of uprooting envy, let us see what the gopis are teaching. How can we actually uproot envy? Is given by the gopis in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in this Gopi Gita from the 10th canto, chapter 31. The gopis are singing Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiritam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadattatam Bhuvi Grinanti Ye Bhurida Jana. which means the nectar of your words, our dear Krishna, and the descriptions of your activities are the life and soul of those suffering in this material world. My dear Krishna, these narrations transmitted by learned sages eradicate one's sinful reactions and bestow good fortune upon whoever hears them. These narrations are broadcast all over the world and are filled with spiritual power. Certainly, those who spread the message of Godhead are the most munificent. Jai. So, by completely absorbing ourselves in the pastimes of Krishna, in the teachings of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, we will be able to take care of this, not just envy, but any kind of negativity that is there in forced within us. And we will be able to overcome this very difficult challenge and very, very purely be able to serve the mission of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu by engaging ourselves in the service of Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for participating in today's discussion. We request you on the YouTube and Facebook page, Advaita Kalasudha, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any updates.
And please share your questions and please ask your questions and have a discussion on this topic. And please let us know what you feel. Thank you all so very much. Hare Krishna.
Srila
Srila
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you all so much.